In this video, we're going to talk about cleaning up U.S. trademark matters once they've been imported into your account. TSDR has been queried to bring over all the details for your U.S. trademarks, and we get frequent questions on the best way to clean up these matters and their tasks. So a little background. We generate these top 3 tasks, amongst others, that are going to get generated for any trademark that gets an issue date or an allowance date. We do not attempt to determine which of these actions that you've done. There are transactions in TSDR that talk about whether or not these declarations have been done, the statement of uses, whether there have been extensions filed, but we found that it's not always completely accurate, so we're not going to rely on it. Even though TSDR says a certain one of these has been received, we're still going to leave these tasks as open tasks for you to complete. For all patent tasks, if the due date is older than 9 months from today, we will not import those. So clearly, if you didn't respond to an office action that was due a year ago, either you haven't filed, your matter's either abandoned, or you've done it. So we will not attempt to generate those tasks. Trademarks are different since declarations can be much older than 9 months before their due dates. So regardless of when these examples would have been due, we're still going to generate those tasks. And clearly here you can see some examples. So this 8 and 15, obviously this was a trademark from a very long time ago, but we still generate these. To make this a little easier to look at, if you are trademark only, then this may not be necessary, but if you imported a bunch of trademarks, the easiest way to clean it up is to filter from your tasks. So now we're just going to filter down for trademark matters. And if we imported them all today, just like I did, filtering down to that date can also help isolate getting rid of other things. So the first thing we're going to do is click Add Filter. We're going to go down to Matter Type, and we're going to enter Trademark. The next thing we're going to do is only show the tasks that were created today. And there's an opened on column, and I'm going to put in today and click Add. And so we've got an easier set to work with, and by default, these are sorted by date. So we've got some 8 and 15s here, whose due date was technically back in 2005. So there are a couple ways that you can clean these up. First, you can highlight the rows like this individually. Or if you want to just look at all of the 8 and 15s, another option is that you could just change your filters again. And here we're going to add in a filter for a task type because we're talking about 8 and 15s. So once I enter task type, I'm just going to define that as 8 and 15. We do have a number of these that are due in the future, and then these ones that are due in the past. So it's up to you how you want to do this. But again, if you're confident that all of these have been done, you can just start checking those ones that are in the past, or even if you have some due in the future. And now that all of those are checked, you can go to Close Tasks in the upper left. And then for the state, we're going to say completed. You could put whatever date you'd like in there. So by default, app call will put in today's date, but you can put anything in the comment section and then get these off of your open docket. If you wanted to go back and say, we actually filed this in 2005, you can always open it, mark it as completed, and then put the actual date that you closed this. And then you've got exact tracking of that kind of stuff. But this may not be something that you're so concerned with. So let's go ahead and go back, and we're going to check all of these. Click Close Tasks, and we're going to mark them as completed. You can mark them closed. In the comments, you can say these were closed after the import or something along those lines. So that way, when they're closed out, these notes will show up in the comments of your tasks. Okay, so those past due ones are out of our system now. And let's move on to the 8 and 9s. So let's click Edit Filters. And we're just going to change this type to 8 and 9 and click Update. Okay, so we've got our 8 and 9 renewals. So same thing, all of these would have been due a while back. And then we have something in the future starting here. So you can do a similar thing just by mass checking all of these if you'd like. You can mark them all as completed. Enter whatever you'd like in your notes if you need to, and click Close Tasks. So AppCall's gone ahead and closed all of those out. Now, since these are 10-year renewal periods, a number of these that we close generated their next due dates for 10 years out. So we actually now have more than we originally started with, because once you close these, AppCall will generate the next one due 10 years out. Okay, so we've covered the 8 and 9, the 8 and 15s. So our next one is the statement of use. Let's go ahead and filter this again. I'm just going to put in statement of use here. So these are all for matters where the initial statement of use would have been due on these dates. And then the next one, we put the final due date after your 6 extensions. So the way you want to work with these is you're not going to mark these as completed unless you've truly filed the statement of use. If you're filing extensions, you actually need to mark these a different way. So how we do this is based on the allowance date. We're going to create a 6-month deadline. If you file this within that 6-month deadline, great, you can mark it as completed. If you want to put in an exact date, feel free to set that status, and that'll come off your open docket, so there's no more statement of uses. On the other hand, if you filed an extension, you need to mark it as such. So you're going to click on Filed Extension, and then click Set Status. And now you've got the 12 months or the second extension period to file this. And it's got the due date 6 months further out. And you would do that until you get to the point where you actually file the statement. If you've got a lot of old stuff and you don't want to put in all of that detail, you can simply mark the 6 months as done, assuming that you actually got to the point where you filed the actual statement. So in that case, again, you could start checking all of these and click Close Task to mark them as completed. So there will be no more actions on your docket to file the statements. So just to reiterate, AppCall does not have a standard task of file extension for statement of use. The only task we have is the actual filing of the statement. So when you get closer in time for some of these, there's a good chance that you filed extensions. The best way to track this, so you know exactly when the next due date is to go ahead and mark these as extension filed, generate the 12-month, and then mark that one as extension filed. Because if you just leave the 6 months sitting there under this, it looks like you're way past due here. So we recommend marking those as extension filed when they have been filed, so you eventually get to the next current due date. The last type that we want to touch on is this review communication. And this applies to patents as well. So when TSDR has been queried to bring over tasks, and we get transactions that don't correspond with an actual to-do task, AppCall will generate a review USPTO communication task. So that's what I'll put in here, review USPTO. So if we get an office action in, we're going to generate a respond to. But there's a number of communications that can come from TSDR where there's no specific task to do item that we're going to generate, but we don't want these to fall between the cracks. So we're going to generate these. You may or may not want to do anything with that, but we still create a hard deadline and we put it as due 7 days after the communication comes in. So again, you're probably going to want to filter these depending on how many trademarks you imported. You could have a huge number of these. So again, the best thing is to filter them. So however you'd like to deal with these. Again, with a lot of these being somewhat older, you may have passed a period where there's anything that you need to do. But as you go forward, you're going to get some that are more current. And some of these are current. And the best way to mark these is as reviewed if you've reviewed them. There's going to be a closed status of reviewed. And it's just the difference between I've actually looked at it, whereas completing it is like you actually did some type of action on it. The other option is you can mark it as not needed as well. Generally, a best practice is not to delete these tasks. You can delete them from here, but when we re-query TSDR, which is done every week, AppCall will look, and if one of these items came through and there's not already a communication task, the system will generate another one. The system is not going to create multiples of these if they already exist, but if you delete them, AppCall will recreate them. So that's why we suggest marking them as reviewed or not needed or completed rather than deleting them. So those are the main tasks that can clutter up your docket that you may want to focus on getting rid of first to clean everything up.